Welcome back to the Newbie Railroad. This is going to be a special episode today where I'm going to cover some of the things that I've done on my journey. I've noticed that recently we've had a number of people joining for the first time watching some of these, and if you came in the middle or you came in just now, you might be wondering, what is this thing? So what it is kind of a video log of my progress as a model railroad hobbyist, and I came into this as a person with absolutely zero knowledge of model railroading. So that's hence the name Newbie Railroad. And so this is kind of the journey that I made, and I've documented a lot of things I've learned along the way, and some of the mistakes, and probably haven't documented all of them, but some of the mistakes I've made along the way. And so hopefully you'll find this interesting or fun or informative, and hopefully, and if so, you know, click the like button down below, and we'll just kind of keep going from there. So today what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be talking about some of the decisions that I had to make when I first got started, just kind of a review. I'm going to just kind of step back and see, you know, where have I been so far, and then a list of things that the things I learned, major lessons that I learned along the way to setting up a railroad that runs but is way, way far from finished. One of the things I've done throughout in all the episodes, and we've had, 16 episodes I think so far, is I've tried in the show notes down below in YouTube, I've tried to enter text of any products that I mentioned, or unboxings that I did, or reviews that I've done, and I've tried to put the full description of the product or the software or whatever it is in the notes. I purposely don't link to the retailer websites very much because things change. Retailers change, and availability of products change, and prices change. And so, but what you can do is copy and paste the text if you're interested and want to know more about or shop for that particular product. You can copy and paste the text from the show notes and put that into a search engine or into your retailer's search engine, and see what you get. A lot of the products, if you put it into a general search engine, and you might get, you know, half a dozen different retailers that carry that product, and then you can shop around and check availability and stuff that's in stock and prices and all that kind of good stuff. So I've always done that throughout. So basically that's it. So on Newbie, this is a show for documenting, you know, what I've learned and how my progress that I'm making, and decisions and things that I've learned and things that I'm still working on, and I don't know why I'm still talking. So let's just go ahead and get started and go into today's show. Let's start with decisions. So before you start a model railroad, I've learned that you need to make some decisions up front. And the first decision I made was the layout size. In my case, it is 16 by 8. And that was based, as it is with most people that build a model railroad, on space I had available. I may try to expand it, make it more of an L shape at some point, someday, maybe, but that day is a long way off, so if ever. But that was my first decision that I had to make, was, okay, first, how much space do I have? And then the next decision was, what scale do you want to use? And I've chosen to use HO scale. And HO scale is, at least at that time, and still is probably, the most popular scale and the most common, has the most variety. If I was to start over, I might do N scale, which is a little bit smaller, and if I didn't have, if I didn't have a 16-foot long table here, I probably would have gone N scale. The thing about HO is that HO has an 18-inch minimum radius. So if we go over here, this curve right here, these curves that I've got are 18-inch radius. That means that to do a 360, the minimum diameter is twice that. It's 36 inches, so 3 feet. So you need a little over 3 foot in width in order to do a 180 turn. If you can't do that, if you don't have that much space in HO, then what you'll probably end up doing is a point-to-point type layout, or a shuttling type layout, rather than a loop. You won't even probably have a loop. But so that was one reason why you really, 4 foot is a nice width for HO, because you can put, as you can see there, I've even got some double track loops on that side. Let's see. Next decision I had to make was on the track, and my path here certainly was not the cheapest path you can take. It was kind of pricey, but it was the easiest path. And so what I chose to use throughout was Bachmann Easy Track, which is relatively simple to put together. Sometimes getting the pieces to fit just right is fiddly, but in general it's pretty easy. It comes with its own ballast, you know, already installed. So it's pretty much just putting it together. And it's easy to move around if you decide you want to change the layout, which is what I was certain I would do and have done some, and probably will do more someday. So I used Bachmann Easy Track, and then I made the decision that I wanted DCC. And DCC means you can one of the advantages, and I've talked about it of course, but one of the advantages is that you can control multiple locomotives at the same time. And with that, I discovered and decided to go with Digitrax. There's lots of different ways I could have gone. Again, some cheaper, lots, you know, some that are really cheap. But I went with Digitrax because I like the controller. I like their device. And it's very easy to set up. And then I added the Digitrax Wi-Fi connection here, so I can run multiple. I can, not in addition to having multiple trains, I can have multiple controllers. So I decided on that, and then kind of the general idea behind the layout. My layout is totally imaginary, and there is no prototype. A lot of people who are really into modeling will model a prototypical railroad. They'll pick a particular place and try to recreate it. And I've not done that. This is imaginary. It's sort of very loosely based on my childhood, but it's really, really imaginary. And so I made that decision, and then that led me to making an imaginary branch line. So imagine that there's a main line off to the side, and that lets me run smaller trains and smaller cars and smaller engines. Remember that 18-inch radius I talked about? If you get one of the really big locomotives, it'll probably derail going around that corner, so around the curve. So you need to have, I need to use, you know, smaller cars, smaller size better, and smaller locomotives to fit in my layout. And so those are the main decisions that I made when I got started. So next, we'll go into what are some of the things I've learned. One of the things I learned was how to make hills out of styrofoam. So I've taken pink insulating foam and learned how to make hills, and I went through some of that in some of the previous episodes. I also learned that at HO scale, figures are really small. For example, there's on this hill in front of us here, there actually is a little mountain lion family right there, but you can't hardly see them unless you get right up close. And so a mountain lion cub in HO scale is really tiny. I've seen ants bigger than that cub. So that was one thing that I learned, was how to do that. And I've got, that was covered in some of these things are all going to have been covered in some of my videos. So I'm just going to kind of run down today a master list. Another thing I learned was about reversing loops. Reversing loop is a section of track where a train enters and then exits in the opposite direction. And I learned that you need to have that electrically isolated, which I have done here, which is underneath the track. You can't see it, but and then you need to have it, probably have it big enough that you can get your whole longest train on the reversing loop at the same time. And then I've got a device over there which monitors that and automatically flips the polarity if it detects a signal from the train and does it in like real time. So when you're driving the train, you don't even notice it, but that works pretty good. So I learned about reversing loops and how they work, and originally I was going to put in 2 reversing loops, but I haven't figured out where to fit that on the table yet. So for now I've just got the 1. Some more stuff that I've learned. I learned about configuration values. The controller, the digital controller that's inside each locomotive, has a whole number of configuration values or settings for all sorts of things. And this is a Digitrax book for their controllers, but any controller that comes with one of your locos should have with it some kind of a list of configuration values. I'm trying to find a list in here. And what those configuration values mean, and how you can, things you can adjust, and you can adjust all sorts of things in them. And so to do so, I learned about a programming track. So my Digitrax Zephyr here has a programming track connected to it, and that is a piece of track that doesn't have any power to it, in that you can't run a locomotive on it. All you can do is change CV values, and you can do that through the menus on the controller. And the only things I've done so far really is I've changed the ID numbers of the locos, and then also I've changed some of the sound configuration, sound values. But for each locomotive, then also you get usually a list, or you can find one, of this for the sound values that it has. So, for example, this is for a HO scale EMD F3 F7 model, and the running number on the side of the train is 6511. So what I've done is I've gone into the configuration values and set the model number to be 6511. So to run that train, I type 6511 or pick 6511 from a drop-down menu. You can see right now today it says 1429 there, and that's because I was running a steam locomotive that was set for 1429. That way you can keep everything straight. Then I've gone ahead and written the number here, like this is an Athearn locomotive 915. This is probably some Bachmann stuff. Yeah, this is the steam locomotive 1429, and it sounds. So you can do that for any locomotive that you have. And so I've learned about configuration values and setting sound values and locomotive IDs. When it comes from the factory, almost all the locomotives, all the ones I've had so far, were set to a default where the ID number was 3. So you tell your computer that you want to drive locomotive number 3, and you can test it out. But you want to change that because if I want to run multiple, I can't have 2 locomotives number 3, so I want to make sure that they're all different. Another thing I learned about was switches, and I have digital switches now, DCC switches. So each switch has a DCC controller with it, and to keep it all straight, I've given them numbers, and I gave them numbers in some sort of reasonable order. But I went ahead and I was going to put little signposts out there on the layout for the number of the switch, but my eyes aren't that great, so I decided to make myself a little diagram. So, for example, this says the switch near the elevator is switch number 10. So if I go over here, that switch right there is switch number 10. And I discovered with the DCC, with the with the Easy Track, there are 2 types of switches. There are really expensive ones that you can buy from Bachmann that have the DCC chip already installed, and you can. And I went through in a video how to program that. But a cheaper way is to buy their regular analog switches, which you would use on an analog track, or you could adjust them manually with this little slider switch here. And then you can buy from them these little control boxes, which actually has, so the control chip isn't in the track, it's in this little box. And you can wire that up like I've done here. It's all pretty much plug and play. There's like no soldering or anything required, which is, I like that. So I've got those 2 different types of. Now what I've done is all the switches in front pretty much are controlled with the cheaper style, and then a couple of the switches in back were the ones that, because it's hard for me to reach back there, I just went ahead and bit the bullet and bought some more expensive ones. I've got, I know there's one there, and then there's the 2 crossovers, and there's another one over there. So that takes me into, I also learned about the different kinds of switches. There are turnouts, and there are crossovers, which are for changing lanes on a parallel track. There are turnouts, which, this is kind of like a turnout, but I didn't use a turnout on it. I probably should have. And there's a Y, which is just it goes equally in both, and it has to do with the angles and stuff that it comes off of. And designing those and getting it all to fit, I learned about a software program called AnyRail, which was free, and I downloaded it and used it, and I've talked about that in a previous video. So I used AnyRail to try to mock up my my layout online to see if it would actually fit or not. And then while I'm talking about software, I've got one other piece of software I learned about, and that was Engine Driver, which is a software on an old cell phone that uses the Wi-Fi box here to serve as a controller. So let's see. Oh, I learned that I can sort of build models from kits, sort of. I have like no artistic ability whatsoever, so anything I've done, anybody else could easily do, and most likely do it better. I'm going to close this by just saying, I've watched a lot of videos of people that have just amazing layouts, and they do incredible modeling, and they have great skill, and I admire that, and there's no way that I'm ever going to do that. So I'm not even really trying, It's like I'm going to set some stuff up here. My goal is to have fun and play around and learn some stuff, and I'm not going to try to, create the really, really super great model that you would see at a train show or that you would marvel at. I'm more of the train layout that you're going to mess with and play with and have some fun with, and so that's kind of my philosophy. I'll try to make it look nice, of course, and I've tried. I have just barely gotten started. I did learn that with Easy Track you can actually ballast the track. I also learned that kitty litter doesn't work too well in HO scale because some of the pieces of kitty litter are actually like huge giant boulders in HO scale. So I went ahead and I bought. I haven't used it yet. I got to reach up here. I went ahead and bought a container of Woodland Scenics Fine Ballast, which I'm going to try to use. But with white glue, water mixture, paintbrush, and a spray bottle, you can lock these down real tight, and you can, if you're careful, you can get. I didn't do a very good job here, but you can get right up. So this track has a bed with it, but it looks kind of plasticky. But if you cover it with rock, with the ballast, then it looks more natural, more realistic. So I learned that too. So okay, that's plenty of me yakking on here today. So again, if you're new here, welcome. If anything that I've mentioned today intrigues you, the things I've already learned, you can go back and watch previous videos if you want, or do a search online for somebody else's video where they talk about it and probably explain it better than me. And so looking forward to having some fun and playing with the railroad this winter, and doing some modeling and doing some running of the railroad and doing some model reviews and some boxes, some unboxings, and all kinds of fun stuff. So that's so long from the Newbie Railroad. See you next time.